super excited about today. This session again is being hosted by the CXPA, and the CXPA is really focused on advancing the customer experience as a discipline as well as within our careers. And I'm excited about today because over the past 6 months, I bet we've all gotten really good at online meetings. But I know I personally have a lot to learn around how to drive collaboration better online. So not to state the obvious, but our customers need us to be able to do that for them, so that we can continue to build on the experiences for them and conduct business differently and more safely as we move forward. You all have already interacted with Valerie today, but I don't know if you all know her. She's a customer experience expert that's here in the Charlotte area, and she has a wealth of experience both with major corporations and with the Big Five consulting to a wide array of companies to really pull together best practices. But she has achievements in customer experience strategy, mapping, implementation, execution, business cases. So she really just has a wealth of knowledge that she can share with us always, but specifically today around collaborating better online. So Valerie, with that, thank you very much for hosting this meeting for us so that we all can learn. And I'm going to turn it over to you with one last thing about the chapter. It's all run by volunteers, so if you're interested in getting involved from either presenting or helping pull together and organizing events, please get in touch with me, Julie Gatton, or with Shelly Chandler. We are both stepping down at the end of 2020, so we are looking for someone to not only help with the events, but then kind of pull the whole chapter together. So please get in touch with us if you are interested. Thank you, and Valerie, it's over to you.
Thank you. So Shelly and Julie and I were talking about what we could do that was kind of a timely thing that was a little bit fun and had a takeaway that might help some people as we're going on. As Julie said, that, you know, there's a real challenge here that we're doing everything virtually. Some people are kind of used to that from a meeting perspective, but I know that we were challenged when we started working with clients of how to get them to collaborate. So, you know, the normal kind of flow of a project is that, you know, everyone meets in person and then they go off and do things, and then they come back and meet in person, and then they go off and do things. And that works really well. But as you go through, it's really hard to keep people's attention. It's sometimes difficult to get them to really step up and collaborate as much as they would in a regular meeting where, again, they're standing up, doing a map on a wall, or they're in a learning environment. So I kind of smurged a couple of things together here so that we could look at a couple of different use cases, one of which would be collaborating on some type of deliverable. And in this case, it's a map of planning a vacation, since all of us aren't able to get out and do that right now. And then the other piece is we're going to be learning some tips and techniques as we go through this. And then at the very end, I'm going to use a technique that Mark from our study group used, which is gamification, which everybody loved. It was kind of fun. They all got very competitive and started answering questions. They got really engaged. So I'm going to do that for the second part to kind of test us on what we learned as we went through this entire process. So we just got ready here. One of the first things is have all of your artifacts and information ready, especially if you're going to have to test it, like clicking through. So the first one is we're all successfully on Zoom. We said, let's open a new tab and go to the exercise so it's ready to go. And then have your mobile ready with Kahoot on it so that we can do the game pin and get going. Anybody having trouble with that now? Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about the differences and the approach around workshops, right? So you're going to get this document in the end as well, so don't frantically take notes or anything. But it's very similar, right? You got to organize the effort. kick off a project, set the scope and scale, determine how much pre-work can and needs to be done, developed a detailed agenda with understanding who your attendees and stakeholders are. And a key piece here is knowing your audience, right? So if you know people are either more forthcoming or shyer than others, or they may or may not want to step up in this type of role, knowing that and being primed for it is really important so that you can encourage others to help encourage them be productive. Gathering and relevant data is really important. Again, you'll see this over and over. Scheduling and executing pre-work like surveys and other preparation is really important so you can be well prepared. In some case, you want to do some interviews so you can ramp up and get smart if it's a subject that you're facilitating and you may not be as smart as you could be on it. Gathering and reviewing data and documentation. So the more you are prepared, the better you're able to seed and enrich the information. Then having some kind of map, device, a process that you can go through is really good so people can react to it and warm up. Starting with a blank page is always difficult, even if you're in person. Right, so having something ready to go so people can look at it and react to it really is helpful. We're going to use some mapping exercises in this particular one. And then refining and validating your information, doing rounds of reviews so that you can overlay metrics or findings is really important. Instead of people, what we see a lot in online meetings is that people will get stuck right at the beginning and you'll never get through. So making sure you kind of go end to end in a few rounds really helps you start being more productive. Ideation. Now this is probably the toughest piece, right? Because this is where you're asking people who would kind of get energy from others to review things and document findings and recommendations as you go along and start brainstorming, right? So you can do that, what we've found, and you'll see it in a tip. There's a lot of techniques around brainstorming that can really be helpful. And then documenting it so that you can send it back out to people for additional rounds of review is really important. And it's more important in this environment because, again, it's a much softer environment. Prioritization, again, you can do this online and offline. Generally, it's a combination of things when you start prioritizing impact and feasibility to get to things that you want to have done. Generally, we look at impact from the customer's perspective, impact from the company perspective, feasibility and cost. And those obviously change if you're doing something around employees or something radically different in doing this type of work. But since most of us are in the CX practice, we're going to kind of stick pretty close to that if it's okay. So that just will help you with that. And then finally, something that you might want to do offline is create that final roadmap and do rounds of reviews with that and set timeframes as you go along. Some people choose to do additional workshops around that. Questions? Okay. So key elements to ensure success. Planning, 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 right? Make sure your attendees can actually attend. So use time zone planning tools, and I have some resources in as we follow along for this type of thing. But you know what we often find is that especially if your global organization, much less one across the U.S., is that there's no good time zones, right? So I was just trying to do something with Michael with a group in Singapore, and you pull up the tool and literally one of you pull the straw is going to be up at 3 in the morning. So as best as you can, try to make sure your attendees can be there and be semi-conscious. Have an objective. Now, this can be either a stated objective of the project, but you can also have secondary objectives of what you need to get done in this particular session So without it, you'll wander, right? We often say, you know, if you don't have a goal or a destination, how will you ever be able to get there? So all of this is stuff you already know as professionals, right? But have an idea of that actual output so you can facilitate it as needed. The more homework you do, the better the session will turn out because you'll be prepared, and provide the information on the tools and devices ahead of time if possible, right? And test those, right? We'll get to that in a minute because gosh, you know, there's BlueJeans and WebEx and Zoom and GoToMeeting, and literally, if you're not familiar with the tool you're using, that often can be difficult to manage. Designing. So designing for the purpose. Is it a training session? Is it an input gathering session? Is it a prioritization session? Each of those tends to have slightly different ways of facilitating and gathering input or sharing the information that are most useful. And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Identify your tools, right? That can be anything from sticky notes on a virtual brown paper, or a video show of somebody sending a PC view up against a wall, all the way through gamification software, right? So addressing the purpose and knowing who you're addressing, whether or not what you want to add a lot of humor to it or break the ice, things like that, having those tools available and ready is really important. And then walk through it for time. So this is really important, as it does usually take longer than you think to go through a virtual session as it does an in-person session. And then execution. Keep the process as familiar as possible to the way your business runs different kinds of programs, right? So have the agenda very typical, where you might have an introduction with the objective. Make sure you're introducing those new elements like virtual tools. Keep a parking lot just like you would in a regular project, so that if someone's ventilating, you can say, hey, we got it documented, move on. Have a scribe. Julie St. John is on today as my scribe. She's our VP of Customer Success. And she and I trade off oftentimes on facilitating and scribing. And then, you know, breakouts are possible if you use tools like WebEx. They actually have breakout rooms. But unless your teams are used to doing that, it tends to take some time and it can be problematic. And then follow up and practice and learn what works for your culture. Questions? Again, nothing new here, right? Go ahead.
No, I do have a suggestion under time zones. If you're doing a one-off session or a session for 1 week, somebody's going to be the time zone loser. But if you have something that is going on for, you know, months of repeated meetings, consider switching the time zone so that Asia, it's usually Asia that loses, so that they're not always the one that has to be up in the middle of the night. The teams will appreciate it.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, you can pull, that would be a great use for the gamification part. The loser gets the lost time zone. Thank you. That's a great input. So now I'm going to go through this all really fast so that we have time to do the actual exercise. But I documented this in some detail so everybody would have it as a takeaway, right? So initially, planning, right? Planning for a virtual workshop. Pre-work, and you notice I've color-coded this. This work can be done generally outside a workshop, and then as we get through this, you'll see what happens more in the workshop. So if you're doing something like a customer experience project and you've got surveys already done and ready to go, and you execute them, or if you're continuously doing that and you're just parsing through the data, having that information ready to go before you do the session on it is very helpful. Also, if you can identify things like benchmarks and competitor status, if you're looking at improvement projects, it's really good so that you can share those. Collect what's planned or already in flight. A lot of time is often spent in discussing whether or not they're doing something, they're not doing something, they could be doing something. So if you have a good idea of what's already happening with the focus and objective of the project, you can be ready to share that information, so you kind of can control that particular narrative that often has a bit of a rabbit trail, right? Prep for the virtual event, right? Have data and a straw man ready so that you can be ready to go. So step number 2, pick the tools right for the purpose, right? Is it a conference? Is it a facilitation? How many people are you having on it? This is 20 some people is a huge group, and this is a simple thing, right? So I think we did, I can't remember Tracy's on, we did one of these with Florida Power and Light just recently, and it had like 30 people.
Yeah.
And you really have to make sure that everybody's getting airtime, right? Otherwise, they're going to feel shut down. Add in some humor, team building to start if you can, just like you would in a regular meeting, especially if the subject you're looking at tends to, find that people work in silos and not across the different organizations. Have your assets and information in your back pocket, right? So data, things like if you're mapping here, moments of truth, pain points, things that are really working well so that you can congratulate people as they go along. People respond well to being stroked. And then try to do a dry run, test the tools, make sure everything works. So now we step into execution, the actual workshop agenda. So create an agenda here, and I've just put some times here for a typical 90-minute exercise like we have here. And that's something, you want to think about. Attention spans are shorter online, so it's better to do more shorter sessions than longer ones. We're going to talk a little bit about refocusing people in a minute. But one of the key indicators of people losing attention span is suddenly all of their videos turn off and they have their pictures there, which means they're doing email. So you always want to kind of have a gauge of how well you're engaging. Make sense? Okay. So first step, obviously introduction, reviewing the task at hand. Perhaps it's a readout of some information that is interesting. What we're going to be doing today is helping each other plan the ideal vacation and making sure that we've got all the steps in that built and collaboratively designed. And then we're going to do an exercise here that does that commentary so that everybody can put sticky notes on and share, right? So generally, it takes more than one session to do a big project. So add water and repeat, right? When you do the second session on a subject, the first thing you want to do is a quick review of the first session, get some input, make some changes if people haven't done it. Perhaps this might be a future state or ideation session, so you can identify gaps and initiatives. Prioritization might be the break where you do something outside the workshop. I'm sorry, my co-workers are talking. And then the third one might be a wrap up, right? With a readout and a work plan, what might be even better. So as you see, these are pretty simple as you go through. And then you always want to do a follow-up, especially when you're doing something in a collaborative or virtual mode, because what often happens is that 2 weeks after you've gotten through the last session, everybody who either didn't take great notes or didn't necessarily know what their action items for the output was, often just kind of fall off. So you want to, again, make sure that you've documented what you did coming into the workshop, what you did during the workshop, and then the action items after the fact. Comments, questions? Anybody see anything that's shockingly different? Okay. So some tips for planning. Again, you guys are all really experienced at this. Thank you. I'm watching my chat as I go along, so feel free to comment. So as we talked about, be sure your attendees can actually attend the event time, especially if you're across time zones. Draw straws for the different groups so that the poor Asia Pacific people don't keep getting up in the middle of the night. Have the objective. Have an idea of the subject, right? For a map, you really want to know sort of what touches you might have, key moments of truth or pain points. For a learning exercise, we just did this study group for the CXPA exam, and it was really interesting because by looking at the questions for the exam, the subject matter that we were going through often changed. And that was the truth for pretty much every subject matter expert. They thought that they were coming into this knowing the subject cold, and then they went through the questions and they said, oh my goodness, there's things I hadn't thought about here, or they think about it differently. So being really well prepared on that subject is very helpful. More homework you do, the better the session, because you can control the process, not necessarily the narrative, unless there's a use case to do that. But again, having that already in your back pocket really helps you speed through some of the blocking and tackling. Have some obvious findings and recommendations so that you can seed the discussion if people are being shy. If you're doing any type of prioritization, make sure that you've got that framework ready to go in a spreadsheet or something else so that you're ready and you're not trying to create the assets on the side. And then have things like surveys organized and summarized. Charts and graphs are great for that. Some tips for design. So identify and test your tools. We talked about, you know, there's lots of tools, and I have a listing of different tools at the end of this. But, you know, anything works. People are used to working with sticky notes. If you've got software, either a design software or something like for the purpose that we have for mapping, anything that you've got, just make sure it's going to work as you go through so you're not wasting time for that. Have a straw man of whatever it is, even if it's totally wrong, that works as a technique. So people will then point out what's wrong. Put in some time for some fun, right? And see if you can use techniques to stir up some friendly competition. Add a little bit of buffer time, right? So plan for a 45 minutes versus an entire hour in general as you go through, because everybody, you know, now in Zoom and COVID land has top of the hour syndrome, right? So people end up missing because they've been top of the hour since 7 this morning, which I bet a lot of you already are. And, you know, it's really hard to get people to focus if they haven't had a meal that day, right? Tips for execution. If the call is audio only, even if it in general is even where you've got visuals, ask everyone to state their names before speaking. This way people in the group will be able to follow who said what. I often find that people get distracted because they don't know, even if they just say what department they're in, it's helpful because it gives people context as they go along. So people forget about that, and it's disconcerting to try to figure out who said what, right? And then they get side things with people texting, who was that? Use rounds of review and waves so you don't get stuck. Use chat as a focusing tool, right? So if I chat with someone privately or publicly, that actually helps people go back and get back into this if they start kind of zoning out, right? Okay, have a scribe to help document verbal content. So that allows you not to make things kind of stop and go while you're trying to capture notes. And then keep, you know, the old rules of workshops and rules of engagement about all ideas being good, being polite in the land of impoliteness is good. So keep all those standard workshop rules going in a virtual mode as well. And then as you go through here, prioritization by impact is a good bet. You know, don't get too complex. Start with high, medium, and low versus scores. You can always do more as you go through, but it's a lot easier to do it if you simplify it so people can chime in. And then as you go through, be sure you talk about and assign people to lead past efforts or things that you're going to be doing in the roadmap with the whole group present, because then that builds engagement and it also builds a responsibility. Comments, questions? Any ideas that I haven't hit on here for planning, design, and execution? Is this going quickly enough for you?
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So some tips for follow-up. So again, have action items. You know, what we find oftentimes, especially with these kinds of meetings, is people kind of float in and out, and you know, they lose that last accountability piece because they forget, right? Share the deliverables and notes back to everyone. Keep the process going if you've got follow-on sessions, right? So what we found is 2 or 3 sessions, even though it's a little annoying, has much more impact than just one, because people will have what we would call soak time, and they think about something and they remember and they think, oh, you know, we were going through this the other day and I should have spoken up, and that's really good, right? So as we go through there, allow them to catch up if we go through. And chart and focus is much better than a forced march, right? If you're doing some kind of learning session or you're trying to get people to remember things, having a winner like we're going to have today on something, or celebrate success, those solidify things. Remember, so if you think of the old peak moment technique, that works with us just as well as it does clients. And then, you know, send a gift or thank you notes, compliment people for their leadership once it's over, because that really works well for employees and it will make them want to engage with you more, right? The little sugar is better than vinegar, right? So what we're going to do now is actually go practice what we just talked about. So everybody go to your tab where you can see this little map here, okay? And what we've mapped here is the journey around taking a vacation. And so what you see here is some loops that people keep going through as they start deciding on where they want to go perhaps, and then they start looking at people and narrowing it down to who do we go with or what are we going to do, and then finally they start solidifying their plan, looking at their budgets, booking the trip, and celebrating getting ready, right? So it's a very simplistic plan, and what we're doing here is looking at different icons. So these icons, this little heart, guess what? Moment of truth. I'm going to take a vacation, or I'll take a vacation in what, 2 years once we're done with COVID. And as you go through, there's some icons here. So I'm searching, so there's a search icon, and I'm talking to people. And the objective of doing this particular map together is we're going to start adding or commenting on the tasks that people are doing as they're doing this, or what you would have done, so that we enrich and augment this particular map. Now, how we're going to do that is you're going to click on this little add a note. And when you click on this right here, you can move it around to where you want it. You're going to put your initials here. Julie, here we go again. My Julie. There we go.
Hit
Sorry.
refresh. Yeah.
I
just hit
did, yeah.
refresh. Sorry, I was on mute.
So I'm going to put my initials here, and then I'm going to say, you forgot to buy luggage. If you could spell luggage. Right? So, and I'll put that in the spot over here, right? So see how that goes? You can use any color you want. And Julie, when you do this, do you have everybody who's going to come in on here, do they need to hit refresh?
Yeah, you might need to just that first time add a sticky note when you get on, and if it will not let you edit in the editable text, just hit refresh in your browser and then that should be open to you.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody try that. Go hit the little star and see if you can add a sticky note. Let's do a little practice here. I'm getting a chat. One moment. Bye, Jessica. We'll tape this for you. Oh, that was Shelly. Sorry, Shelly. Bye, Shelly. Thanks for coming on. Okay, anyone putting sticky notes on? Look at all those sticky notes. I love it. Cool. Okay, so let's walk through this together. We decide to take a vacation.
Wait, I'm sorry. How do you get I can't get my sticky note to move. What am I not doing right?
Just click right on the sticky note.
Uh-huh.
See how just anywhere on the sticky note, it should be able to move. Try that again.
I think she's talking about from the top when you click on the star.
If you double click it, then it jumps down onto the map.
Mine doesn't.
You see.
Yep.
Yeah,
it.
I
mine.
was trying to drag them and
Me
there was
too.
the whole box was working, but if I double clicked it, then it jumps off the little box and onto the map. At least for me it did.
And then you can move it. Yep.
And then I could move it.
Go to the asterisk and then
Yep. Double click.
yeah, it's not. It's all right. Go ahead. I'll watch. It's fine.
Okay. Well, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we've decided to take a vacation. Do you all think about what type of vacation you might have first, or what do you normally do?
What activities you want to do, like more of a city or nature?
Yeah, yeah. Is that the first thing that you do, or do you see what your budget is, or do you get inspired by a magazine? Yeah. Okay. What about Yelp? Okay. Where would I put that, Heather? I bet that's Heather.
Yeah, I was just seeing if I could edit the sticky note. Near the TripAdvisor, I guess.
Okay. Great. So in this case, see, what we're going to do is we can go back into this, and because I can see everybody's notes, we can update the map and do a round of review and send it out to people, right? So what anybody else, what would you do here when you're thinking of the type of vacation? You want to put a sticky note there?
Yeah, I definitely look at the budget first. Because you can't go to Australia on $100, you know.
Okay, who's this?
It's Heather, sorry.
Okay.
Hey, Valerie, this is Linda. I also, when I click on the star to try and even get a sticky note, it does not deliver me anything.
Really?
Yeah.
So
there's a screen that that pops up that says add a note, but then it immediately disappears.
that's interesting. What are you on? Are you on IE or are you on Foxfire or Chrome?
I'm on Safari.
Oh, that's
Yeah, same here. I'm on Safari and I'm having the same issue. This is Annette. So I'm just following along watching.
Oh, that's interesting. Did you try refreshing your page?
I did.
Okay. Take that down. We may have a Safari bug.
Yeah, I'm on Safari. It's working for me at this point.
Okay.
But I had problems initially getting doing the double click and getting it to stick on the map.
Huh.
But it's working now. I did refresh a couple times.
Okay. So, well, tell us, Linda, what would you do? We'll just fill it in for you.
Well, I was going to add a note that said that I was traveling with friends, so we had multiple decision makers.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh no. Okay. So what would you do then? So we've got what type of vacation here with multiple decision makers. Would you take the lead and Google a destination and share that, or share a brochure, or what?
Well, there's a lot of sharing that goes on. This is like my life. There's like always multiple people I'm traveling with. And so getting everybody to the point where they're sharing, and getting to agreement is always quite challenging.
One thing we'll do is, I have the same thing, to start a Google sheet.
Who's this?
Oh, sorry, this is Jessica. So under kind of lots of sharing, where like the how is
Okay.
starting that.
Okay. Great.
Linda, I can't wait to travel with you.
Yeah, Linda would be a great person to travel with. She's fun.
I'm in Ireland right now, by the way.
Cool.
Where are you?
Well, we had to cancel it all.
Oh.
So
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in England as we speak. I started it for June of this year, and then I moved it to August, saying, "Oh, everything should be made great from August," and I just moved the plane tickets to next June. We'll see what happens, right? Okay. So now you see how this goes. We're searching for some inspiration. You're talking to friends here, so we're going to put the Google sheet here. That's a great idea. And then what? What are people doing here? Maybe they're looking at looking at TripAdvisor, National Geographic to get some ideas. What now? Oh, you like my sticky notes? Aren't they fun?
They are.
Okay, so we went on one vacation that had an interactive vacation page, and actually it was a friend of mine who's an anesthesiologist, Ann Kramer. Any of you who know her from CXPA and Peppers and Rogers, and they had this interactive vacation page that just like blew us all away, and we spent way too many useless hours looking at it. Then we looked at magazines and we talked to each other about that. What else would we do here if you were doing a trip? Anything else?
I actually edited a sticky note and it doesn't seem to be showing up. So that's interesting.
Same.
Okay. What was
there
it?
you go. Yep, there it is now. It's the blue
And
one up
where
at the top.
do you want it?
Nope, that's
Right
not
here,
me.
right at the beginning. How much time can I take off? Got it.
Yeah, that's a good one. No, mine's up towards the top, just under the asterisk button, HG. Can they handle the food allergies? That's one of the big ones for me.
Food allergy. Yeah, that's another big one here. So that is going to be probably when we narrow to several options, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Anybody else here as we go through? We've got a Google Sheet. We've got Yelp. Figure out if they need to visit anyone. Okay. Where would that go?
I think under more about the destination toward the beginning.
Okay, Google destination here. Okay, got it. You got friends or family that you're gonna go visit. Okay, great. Now we're going over here. Anybody else does put anything up here that we have to put in? Is my passport valid? That's great. Where am I going? I've decided it's international. Perfect. Right. Okay, my luggage issues are way over here. Okay. Anybody else?
My parents would say contact AAA.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of in that same regard, this is Linda, is in looking into travel insurance.
Okay. Now, that's sort of, do you do that early, or I've got someone chatting at me? I usually do that about
for travel,
looking at flights and
advisory travel.
Pardon?
Advisory travel from like don't go to this destination or something.
Ah, yeah. So look at, yeah, that's a good one.
And the CDC COVID restrictions.
Yeah,
I put that one on
okay.
the map as well if you want to refresh.
And okay.
And if your husband, what places his
Oh, who
company
cares
will
about
allow him to
them?
travel.
Okay. So that's probably here. We're narrowing it down to some options, right? Okay. Okay, get some input from the family there. Okay. Okay, going through here. So see how this is working as we go through. So I've heard from a couple of other people.
How about checking your travel points?
Okay, Julie, you want to throw that on?
Sure.
My Julie, you throw it over here. So we're going to look at, so now here, this is where points come in, right? So we want to look at costs. How much is it? We've started a plan here. How many points do I have, right? Do I need insurance? Right? Do I need to talk to my family about ideas? Things like that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone checking chat to see if anyone's asked questions online here? Right. Now here we might call the tour operator or validate my costs, and say, hey, I'm thinking of this great adventure trip for the family, and it's going to be at Yellowstone. What do you all think, right? And everyone says, oh yeah, anything to get out of the house.
Book hotel, or like when you search hotel / Airbnbs.
Okay, so that would be over here. Travel. Julie, you want to throw in checking travel options here, looking at flights? We've missed that one. So here, if you stick a sticky note right here, that would be great. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Just hit refresh. You'll see some new ones.
Okay.
So one thing I do that's probably kind of strange is I also look at restaurants.
I do too. I start this word list because you start seeing stuff like in the New York Times or whatever where they have all the restaurants you want to go to, and then my stomach leads the vacation. It works great.
It does work great. I have a little notebook that I've been pulling pages out
Oh,
of Food and Wine
Triple
for years.
D. We love Triple D. Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. Yeah. And then you get into either TripAdvisor or you do Cruise Critic or whatever. And that then starts doing things as well. Oh, I love it. Okay, great. So you kind of see how this goes, right? We're going to jump into the next section here. But this is a really great way to collaborate, right? And there are tools that will do this other than SuiteCX, obviously, because this is our tool, we've got control of it. We can do it mapping and collaboration. But there's Mural and Miro and Bluescape and a few others, and I've got a list of those that just allow you to do this. And at worst case, you can just pull up your PowerPoint and put notes on the PowerPoint too, right? There's no reason why you can't go ahead and just use your PowerPoint and put a note here, right?
Hey Valerie, this is Jessica. Do you what are your thoughts of, since everyone can add a note, right? And that's really a great benefit over having to just do it very manually in PowerPoint, to give people like 5 minutes just to throw all their notes on there and then start reviewing them? Or do you really like to facilitate, like more so like how we did here?
Depends on the use case, right? So one of the things we often do is, because we can download this little pup into a PDF, is that you, depending on your group, I can now send this around in a PDF and people could put comments on it and send it back to me. You can use the comment function, right? So oftentimes we do that, where you can put a comment on and stick it on here as I go through and comment, right? Or someone's sending me a note, sorry. Someone else is dropping, no worries. We'll get the recording out to everybody. I know everyone's got busy schedules, but this is a good way of doing it. Or alternately, we give them the access to this earlier and after, so you can leave it open and people can put their sticky notes on ahead. Depends on your culture, right? If you've got homework people and they will respond to this, you give it to them, or the second time around, you give it to them and they can do that. Alternately, again, if you're trying to get them to discuss stuff, especially if you have departments that are shy, like IT or HR or whatever, then you want to do it live.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and I'm even curious if there's like a hybrid, right, where you start off and then you have people go off for a couple of minutes and do it.
So someone just said they've let everyone put their notes in a box and then the scribe sorts them onto one diagram, right? We can facilitate that. And again, for the people who use this tool, we can download this into a spreadsheet. So if you've got a spreadsheet group that wants to work on it in a spreadsheet and then upload it again, we often do this in a worksheet that Julie or I will scribe, and here's all of the touches that we just went through and the life cycle, and people can fill this up, and then you upload it at the break and voila, you have a map. So if so there's lots of different ways to do this, and it often is the personality of the company that drives that.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next section here, where you're going to grab your phone and we are going to go through some questions and answers. So now, where was I? Okay, so go ahead. So when you have your Kahoot IT open, it asks you for a game pin. Stick that in there, please. Oh, Marianne, you know how to do this. Brenda, there you are. Excellent.
We were all pretty tame with our nicknames.
Yeah, I know.
I almost put J-Boss in, but.
You could. I know you have had practice, MA.
Lucky
Linda. Great. I love it. Okay, is everybody ready to go? So we're going to start this, and the first question set. Getting ready, the quiz. Are you a CXPA Charlotte Region member? So answer your question. You have 25 more seconds to do this. '16 section. Excellent. So look at that. 11 people got it right. One person said yes, and one person said maybe. Who's asking? I love it. So now you know how to play. So this is kind of fun. So the next thing we do here is everybody gets scored, right? So now by the time we're done with this, we're going to have a clear winner in this workshop. So as we go through here, question number 2, I only did 10 questions because I knew we had things. So let's talk about timing for a virtual session. Is it the same as in person? Doesn't need to accommodate breaks? Who would ever know you left? Tee-hee. Should prepare for the session to move a bit slower, or always starts and stops at the top of the hour? Okay, everybody vote. You've got 10 seconds. 12 answers. This is a good group. And the answer is correct. You should prepare for the session to be a little bit longer, right? And yeah, I knew you'd have some smart Alex in this. So let's see how people are doing. Ah, lucky Linda goes to the head of the crowd. Excellent. Third question, what's a key indicator of success for a virtual workshop facilitator? Doing your homework, making everyone behave like they would in a regular meeting, right? Being flexible, or who needs a plan? Okay. Okay, we got a breakout here, 50-50, doing your homework. And number 5, being flexible. So yeah, I could see being flexible is good as well. Doing your homework is also important, right? So we talked about doing your homework. I think both of these would be key indicators, but because we had to be sneaky like we were in the CXPA exam thing, we made it a little tricky.
So Valerie, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Sorry. So we're picking the one we think is right, or?
Yeah.
So being prepared wasn't the right one?
Yeah, well, you know, in this particular one, there could have been 2 right answers.
Okay.
Being flexible or being prepared. I would have picked being prepared, but when I went through the question set, being flexible was the one that won.
All right. Okay.
And lucky Linda has an answer streak of 3. Look at you. Okay, 4 of 10. When designing the session, what should you have ready and tested? Tools, a parking lot slide, your prioritization templates, or all of the above? Okay, all of the above. You want to have facilitation tools, a parking lot slide so people can vent and they know they're heard, and prioritization templates should you need them. Okay. Linda, you're just on a crazy streak here. Question number 5, when developing your workshop, what don't you need to do? Have a stiff drink, skip the dry run, test the tools and conference bridge, or share the access information prior to the meeting? Since it's 5:30, I figured I'd throw this one in. Okay, very good. Oh.
I think that's debatable.
I know. Well, we can certainly do that in the next workshop session. We just call it a virtual cocktail hour, right?
We've actually been trying to figure that out. So if anybody has figured out the finer tips of the virtual cocktail, please be in touch, because we've been trying to figure that out.
Yeah, well, we've been having quarantinis. It works beautifully.
Yeah.
You just don't want your video on. Okay, when starting a virtual workshop, what should you do first? Introduce the team, review the ground rules, set expectations, or all of the above? So you see here, we can throw in different questions as you're going through, but it often is a good technique to have all of this in so that you can encourage people to remember all of the tips, right? So as a learning group, again, as we go through, Linda, you've just been racing along, but there's 5 players who've hit a 3 in a row answer streak. Cool. Okay, 7 of 10. Should you try to get the whole project done in one virtual session? Yes or no? Now, we have overachievers in this group, I know, but that is the correct answer. Who answered yes? Get it done with, right? Oh, Jules just hit an answer streak number 4. That's good. Your check is in the mail. What approach helps engage the team in a virtual session? Singing, quietly reading slides, breakouts, or gamification? Excellent. Everybody's a star. Lucky Linda's still in the lead, but Heather, you are catching up fast.
I just can't catch her.
Yeah, you only have 2 more questions. What works as a focusing tool? Calling out people's names if you think they're doing their email, pulsing loud noises to make you pay attention, using chat to aid shyer people in asking or responding to a question, or muting everyone. Couple more seconds. Okay, excellent. Using chat. Calling out people's names does work, but depending on the culture, again, people sometimes get embarrassed. So if you know somebody actually has the answer and you can kind of gently call on them, that works, but that would often work better in a private chat so that you can say, hey, you know, I did that a lot on our study sessions because I knew people had answers, so I pinged them individually and said, speak up already. Right? I think Linda may have an insurmountable lead.
I think she does.
And the last question here is, when facilitating a virtual session, you should be flexible and open to the group's inputs, be in control at all times, ensure there's never any dissent, and pack the session with no time to broach any question.
I've certainly been on ones with the last one.
Okay, everybody got that one correct. And now we have the podium with Brenda being in 3rd place, 8 out of 10. Heather, 9 out of 10. And Miss Perfect Linda with 10 out of 10. There you go. Congratulations. Woohoo! Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to walk through this. Great job. I've got the test questions in a separate document that I'll send you if you want. And then let's talk about just a couple more slides as we go through here. A word about tools, right? So there's tons of conference tools. If you work for a corporation, it's dictated to you, right? You can have different ones. Zoom is in or out of favor depending on the looseness or focus on security. WebEx is good, except for sometimes it's a little annoying if you can't share your whole screen and you have to go in and out and in and out. I find that annoying when you're a guest. GoToMeeting is great because they actually have a GoToTraining module. And some of them do things like web polling, so you don't have to use that third-party tool, or online whiteboards and things like that. So depending on the tools that you've got at hand, I think that there's just different ways of doing that. Good old-fashioned PowerPoint or Word with the scribe and view mode works as well. You know, if you don't have a ton of resources, that works. There's tools like Mural or Miro who do sticky notes. That's all they do. And those are good tools. Bluescape also does that. Specialized tools like SuiteCX or Touchpoint Dashboard, you know, again, that if you're doing something like for the purpose for a map, those are great tools. I don't know as much about the annotation capability of the others, but you know, again, that's just a good way to document your answers. Things like Kahoots, Madlib are great for mobile and are great icebreakers. And then there's different kinds of time frame tools. I just put a few of these here because I spend a lot of time trying to negotiate different time zones, and I'm time zone impaired. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, ideas and tips, and then I gave you a little bit of a few links around other folks' how to run a great virtual meeting, tools for facilitating meetings, and then Slack had a really great guide on how to guide remote meetings. So, any discussion, information you want to share? What did I miss? How did this work? Anybody left?
Val, maybe just a question on when you have a group that you know, is very individually minded, and you've got dissension or, you know, strong disagreement on you know, direction, or in particular as you're going through that mapping session, right? Any tips or thoughts on how to reconcile or resolve when that happens?
Sure. Well, there's a couple ways to do that. One is obviously get everyone's input and document it. And if it is a parking lot issue, say, hey, that's a really good issue. Let's put it in the parking lot. We'll come back to it. And again, rather than let people fight it out on the phone, so to speak, but if you have two very strong opinions of it does it, it doesn't do it, just say, hey, let's document this and take this offline so that we don't distract the rest of the group, right? So that way you can kind of acknowledge, just like you would in a hill of anger in a call center, is acknowledge that you hear them. Ask, you can also, it depends on how much time you have, you can also ask other people what their thoughts are around addressing that particular issue. So rather than have everyone kind of pile on, if it was a customer project, well, what do you think the customer thinks of that? Right? So you can distract them from fighting with each other if they're siloed, things like that. So I think that acknowledge, if you can move it to offline if it's taking up too much time, document, and then follow up is the safest way. But then the secondary way is to have a broader discussion of other people where you say, does anyone have actual data around this? Can we see what the data says around this, or can we see what the customer says? And then that tends to keep people from like all out war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, it's interesting. I've just found that in this online world, people seem to be having more of those kind of disagreements that when we were all in a room together, which has always been my preferred way of doing work, that there's something about the in-person I won't debate the same way that I will if I'm
right. That's the whole passive aggressive thing of text and email as compared to being in person or on phone.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same behavior as I'm anonymous here. And so if you can humanize it a little bit, you can again empathize with them and say, yeah, I understand that sounds like it's a real sticking point for all of us, but we need to get through the rest of this. We'll come back to this as we go through. Does that make sense? Anybody else have a better way of doing that or an alternate way?
Well, no? And I just I love your point, the bringing the customer back into it, you know, bring the customer into the room, so to speak, and, you know, let's think about it from their perspective.
Yeah, that always, that I've found, in as well as you, is that bringing that outside in of the customer is something most people can't necessarily argue with, right? Because it's what the customer, the voice of the customer says that this is painful for me. Then the two departments who say, well, I don't really care, I have numbers to make and I don't care about the customer. Well, gosh, the other one says, but we really care about the customer. Well, what does the customer have to say for that? That really, you know, is difficult. Okay, anything else? Okay,